Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is team factors. So I'll come to you, Stu. So once these individual players have developed the capabilities and skills, what does create the attack look like within a team framework?
Yeah, I suppose we've talked around identifying the individuals and the players we're working with, and I suppose I'm going to go back to that same one, isn't it? So it's recognising where you are on the pathway, isn't it? So where your development, where your performance, because it might look very differently around how you might start to think about what this looks like in a team environment. Then you might have to start considering, the style of play you want to try and play within create the attack moment and the system of play, but also the individual players, what you've got at your disposal, because it might change from one game to the next. Then on top of that, you've got to start thinking about the opposition you're playing and what style they're playing and what system and individual. So, it really does become a really kind of big theme of, a topic to try and discuss. And I suppose it's that, isn't it? It's just recognising and going all the way through the pathway. If they've got all these key capabilities at an individual level, that then allows you to start thinking about the tactics. It starts allowing you to think about your style of play. It allows you to start making informed decisions around how you're going to provide solutions to the problems you might face within any moment of the game. Because if the technique's not there, doesn't matter how good your tactics are, I would probably suggest they're going to fail. So it's that connective piece. It's just recognising from a very early level, what is it you want to try and get the players to do and how you're going to do it. And then when you start to get around the performance side of it, what can the actual players do? Because if I'm asking a group of players to play in a certain way and they can't do it, I'm probably suggesting you're not going to be very successful. So you might have a way of playing, but you might have to be adaptable in terms of the opposition you might face, but also the people you might be working with. So I don't want to throw depends without the Futch, because it does probably depends. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to start considering. It's really attaching it to the group of players you've got. So if I'm maybe asking the people in the call to just consider, who the individual you've got, what are the capabilities, and how is it then players can fit into a style and system of play which will allow them to be the best versions of them to hopefully be successful in the game.
I think you put it really well, Stu, and I think it just highlights the importance of the layering of the player's development of the individual and then building up to small connections before you go into the 11v11, because if you jump straight into it, as you're saying, you might want players to play a certain way, a style, a strategy, but if they've not got the capability to do that, it's going to fall down anyway.
Yeah.
So I think you've done that really well. Have you got any thoughts on it, Paul?
Yeah, I think in essence, what's the game problem? We're trying to score a goal. We're trying to go to the other end. They've got a compact group, maybe 11 in front of us. What are we going to do? Well, certainly, if we've got that individual capability, if you're a Van Dijk or you're, Alexander Arnold or something, you might be able to hit a ball right from the back over the top for one of the front players running. We saw that on that clip. We saw Mane running behind from the back to the front. So that's a pass for a run direct over them. But if you're playing against real top players, that's unlikely to happen too often. Or if, like Stu's saying, you're younger, you haven't got the physical capability to do that, then you're going to have to maybe play a pass through them. So now we're working around. They're trying to stop you play through them or around them. So now you're searching. So I call it a play around ring. You'll have a play around ring at the back. And now we're searching and we're looking for connections for, say, a midfield player coming off who we can play to. Now, if he can turn and play the centre forward through, great. But it's not very likely they'll let that happen. They're up and stopping it. So now there becomes a midfield play around. And again, we might look for that run for the pass, a diagonal run for a straight pass, a blindside run, an open up, or so on. But again, top level's not so easy. So now you might get some combinations. So you might get a 1-2 down the line, an overlap, and so on. So you're looking for combination play, definitely. But quite often you won't have that. And that's why you need players who can receive it with their back to goal, who have the individual capabilities to turn and shield it, to play out, to let the ball run across them. All these capabilities to think about how are we doing it. If you can't go forward, you may have to come all the way back, right the way back. And by doing that, you're trying to loosen their defense sort of lengthways. So will they now come out with you? So that creates gaps in between the lines. If you play it square, maybe once or twice, you're trying to open up gaps up widthwise. Now, their defense will try and coordinate against you up. Next one's up. He goes back to stop any gaps. So, again, it might be a reverse pass, change the direction. Or you might entice all the team over to one side, then quickly out the other side, and you might run with the ball into space, commit someone. So it'd be a change of direction. Or as I said before, it might be control, pass, and then pass. That might be a change of speed that might get it through. All of which would be really important. So when we're watching these top teams, sometimes probably they do it more than the English teams at lower levels, particularly. They will entice a lot of players to them before they try and go through them or around them. Yeah.
Good. I think when you're looking at Futcher as well, it's around space, time, and numbers, isn't it? So it's a strategy you want to try and deploy against the opposition. So how do we maybe get players into central positions? And it might be, you see lots of different ways, don't you? So you might get centre midfielders dropping into the back line, which has a knock-on effect to different players in and around them. You might get centre midfielders dropping into the false fullback position. You might get the 9 dropping in like Harry Kane does now into deeper positions to try and provide that numerical advantage and open up different kind of passing lines to try and play through. So yeah, within your team, it's just recognising and giving a whole host of different variety to the players so they can come up with the right kind of answer to the question what's being posed to them.
I was going to say, what's the problem the opposition are posing? So you need a flexibility among your players, and you need your players to be able to kind of recognise it. So it's, again, when the younger ages, giving them the experience and putting them in positions to practice things. When it happens in a game, they can see it themselves and they can change themselves. And whether that's dribbling, whether it's passing, whether it's running beyond, it's always in relation to what the opposition are giving you and what they're trying to prevent. So it's that flexibility for me as a coach, but also within players. Yeah, look at the top players now. Grealish, even though he can start wide, he doesn't stay wide. Same with Foden; they'll drift inside when it's then you've got players on overlaps, like overlapping fullback. So it's very different, and it's all related to what the opposition are giving you.
Yeah, and I know we've talked a lot around practice design, but we should be talking around game design as well. So those who are in a favourable position to maybe organise games to try and provide the players different challenges, it's a great thing to try and think about. So if we don't maybe say, for example, we're just playing teams who play the same way, then we might be missing a trick. So how can we go and search for them kind of opportunities to play against different styles of play, different formations, different surfaces, different cultures around nationalities and all that kind of thinking, to try and give our players as much experience and much opportunity to make the decisions as we can. So practice design is absolutely fantastic and key, but I think also we need to think more deeply into what the game gives us and how we can start planning more games, but also different type of games to give our players different challenges.
Yeah. Just come to you, Paul. So we're talking about practice design. What do you consider some of the benefits and trade-offs of opposed, unopposed practices, directional versus like multi-directional practices? Have you got any thoughts around that?
Well, I think that one of the key things to understand is if you're trying to penetrate to go towards a goal in a match, you've got defenders there. So you're trying to find gaps within the defenders, and they're moving patterns. So if you don't have defenders there within inexperienced players, some people play shadow play or they have no real reference point for where the defender would be. Some people then use mannequins. Can be useful, but also, again, I find the mannequin doesn't move. So as the ball moves, really the position should move. And the young players quite often, they don't really relate to where the defender would move to. It's more probably with experienced players, they can use them more readily. So I think in trying to think about the game, quite often we think about patterns of our team, but the patterns of our team have to be related to the opposition. So, we're trying to find gaps within what opponents are doing. So one of the key things, say for individual tactics, is changing direction. So you get your player moving, your opponent moving one way, you move them, and then you change direction and speed quickly. So you beat them by going against the flow. But if there's no defender there, Where's the practice? That's very sort of clear. I mean, I see a lot of, so probably the people who practice most on their own are the goalkeepers. So they quite often have goalkeepers shooting at them so they can make saves. And I'm saying, well, okay, for a certain amount of technical work might be okay, but then you need the forwards who are trying not to shoot at you, but shoot past you into the corners, who might use disguise, who might use a first-time shot, who might bend it round a defender, who might play it through a defender's legs, who might dummy to shoot, disguise. All these things, they're the things that the goalkeepers need to practice against. That's what they can see in a match. They need to see those patterns in a game and in that duel with the striker. That being one example, So, yeah. But also by the other token, if you go to too many players too soon, the players really can't see the wood for the trees. There's too much information for them there, and is it quite often too much information for the coach to then easily sort out and give good feedback from?
Yeah, I'll just follow on from that. Just got one on the chat box from Neil here saying he finds unopposed allows his players the time to practice the movements and skills without the pressure of an opponent, and then step up to doing it versus a defender. And I'll answer that one. I think there's a balance. If it's all unopposed, I think then you lose the realism. Like Paul's saying, then, where's the kind of defenders? Where's the reaction to defenders? But as you've got there, Neil, if you find that works unopposed, but I think the important thing for me there is you build that into having some opposition then. And as Paul said, senior players, you probably see more mannequin work. But then again, whenever I've seen senior level, then it kind of builds into the opposed. So you're actually building and layering it up. So I think the key thing is as a coach is knowing why you're doing what you're doing and having an understanding of that yourself. And I think that's the big thing for me. I don't think there's necessarily right or wrong, and I think that there's a balance. But the key thing is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And then if you're going to do unopposed practices, try and build it in then with the kind of realism of the game where you have got defenders and opposition. So just the players can put it into practice just to see if they've got understanding, because things can look brilliant unopposed, then the defenders are in there and it can look very different. So if you're going to go unopposed, then I'd try and build it up to get that realism, get the opposition in there for the players as well. Anything, Stu?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's, certainly for one, it's understanding who you're working with and giving the right thing at the right time. But it's got to connect to the game. We've got to make sure that whatever we do in practice really allows them to make strong connections to the game and give them a chance to go and explore. I just keep, I'm working with a grassroots team at the moment. First thing you say, are we playing a game? So let's just give them the game. Give them the game, whatever format it might be, small numbers, big numbers, whatever it might be. But we're just recognising what them players need at that right time, isn't it? And just trying to offer them some information which will hopefully help. And if it is opposed and they can see where it fits within the game, then hopefully when they go to a Saturday, Sunday or a Tuesday, whenever it might be, game day, they can hopefully be in a good place where they can go and succeed.
You got anything else on that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, just wrapping up really is it's about perception and action, and you can't have that. If you don't have opposition, it's hard to get that. So yeah, you might be layering it up, but as soon as you can get it into realistic opposition, I think one of the key things we said, what faults have we got? Well, we maybe don't look over our shoulder. If there's no opponent there, you don't have to. And so really the skill is against an opponent. That's the real test of it.